Catherine Attla was born near Huslia in 1927. She grew up speaking Athabascan and learned subsistence skills and folklore directly from her grandparents in their trapping cabins or fish camps. She married her husband Stephen in 1944, and they went right to spring camp. Later that year they settled at Cutoff, the old village site at the mouth of the Huslia River. In 1949 they moved to the new Huslia village site, another 10 miles down the Koyukon River. By the time she was 30 years old, Catherine had taught herself how to speak English and learned how to read and write at the village school. She raised 9 children and taught them much about subsistence. Since then, Catherine has taught more people about her way of life. She worked with anthropologist Richard Nelson and linguist Eliza Jones to document Koyukon language and culture. During this time, she wrote a book of Athabascan stories entitled As My Grandfather Told It. These days, she spends lots of time teaching the old ways to village children, visitors, and scientists alike. If you visit her house, she just might have a moose hide on her floor and be teaching some kids or visitors how to tan it. Hi, I'm Mike Spindler, your host for Raven's Story. In this chapter, Catherine Attla of Huslia told me her views about sharing Indian knowledge with others.
I believe now that I used to feel different about, I don't know how to speak English, and I don't understand the non-native people, their laws and everything. And I used to hide with my belief because I was ashamed of not knowing. But there's so many people tell me your knowledge is as good as or better than what we know.
As we were talking one day a few weeks ago, that it's the Indian scientist or the Indian biologist that you guys know because you've lived here all your lives and you've figured it out.
And I used to hide those things, just like, I never say it much, or I just think, they're not going to believe it. But believe it or not, I'm going to say it today because I found out you have to share your knowledge. And so they were scientists, I guess what you call, because they know the weather, and sometimes they know by animal. I remember we used to fish every fall, try to catch enough fish to last, most of the winter. And my grandmother would check the fish net, and I would be in the boat, and she was catching white fish. And there's some other people in the boat too. And she would say, "Oh, it's going to turn cold now. It's not going to warm up no more. Look at the nose of these fish. Just like there's white dots all over its nose of the white fish." And sure enough, it never warm up again. It just get colder and colder and colder. So they used to know by animal. We go by things, just like scientists. I don't know why I didn't, I don't know if I tried because I'm scared to die, I guess. Anyway, there's a snipe with orange feet, and I forgot what snipe that is, but I know it in Indian.
What's its Indian name?
Zolnoska. And it flies, and then it make noise, not that high one, and not that the one that come down and make that noise. This one is just short. And they would say, "Seeds" means my breath. And if you say "seeds" and it quit, means you got short life. And why you wanted to know? I used to be scared of that one because I thought it might tell me and I'll worry. But this one girl that was raised with me, and she was orphan, my grandfather's niece, and Flora Cook, you know, she lost her parents and she didn't care. She was the one that used to say that to it all the time. And I tell her, as a little kid, I tell her, why no, that we're not going to live long. But that's what they did. Another way of measuring your lifetime is, grandfathers say, they used to catch their first fish and they try not to break a bone, you know. And that's hard to do. They roasted over fire and they would eat it and they just leave the backbone just the way it is. Eat on both sides. And they start with a bone on one end, the head end, and without breathing they go down on every in between the not rib, standing rib, all the way to the tail. They try to do that. And there too I used to think, why no, that you'll have a short life. I was always scared of that. There's two things that you hear so many things about different animals, how they used to mark things, you know, what weather is going to be like. And like for seagull, when seagull come in spring, when they really come in now, right now you see one or two here and there, but they fly in flocks. Okay, when they fly, just a whole bunch at one time, that means good salmon summer. A lot of salmon is going to come. They used to go by that too. And, you know, things like this I have to record, I think, because I'm forgetting too much English. But there's so much about our Indian belief. And like I say, I used to be ashamed of my language, of speaking English, you know, because I didn't learn till I was 14. And I know only Indian way. I was ashamed of it, like, you know. And now that I wanted to leave it like it's always been, everything I learned is passed on, stories. And now that I'm not ashamed of it, when I found out it's my knowledge, you know, knowledge is different. And I just wanted to leave as much as I could. I found out that's what my grandparents wanted to do with me, leave things with me.
How are some of the ways you share your knowledge with the people up at Huslia, especially the younger people?
Like when I invited them, when I was making a dry beaver, and I told them same time about that pike guts that they used to keep oil in, you know, blew in that, the biggest part, blew in it and dry it, just like balloon, and later on they pour oil in it and tie it back up, and because there was no container. And then there's times I put up notice that I want to teach how to make Indian ice cream. I know my niece Maudie Sam learned, and I don't know who else from doing that. And then there's another time I put up notice that I'm going to jar meat. And then I go to school at least once or twice during the school year to talk to the students. And then I share with my people about our beliefs, about potlatch and different things, how to share, how to be nice to other people who comes during the cover dish or potlatch. And I call that our Indian school. There's times somebody would say, we're hungry, food is getting cold. I said, when do we have chance to share our knowledge as Indian? We have no school. We have no teachers of our own. I said, this is only chance for us to talk together, to share with each other. And so I never hear that no more. Nobody say we're hungry. We used to hear that, but we explain to each other. That's only school we got. That's only time we get together and have a chance to listen to others. And now even little kids trying to share. And the smallest I seen was when Grandpa Chief Henry died, I think. Patlats. There was speech for 2 hours and 40 minutes. All the food was out there. That's when one of the times I heard this elder man say, we're hungry, food is getting cold. He was kind of a little dizzy. We're hungry. Kids are hungry. And I start telling people that when do we have school for ourselves among us Indians. And that speech lasted 2 hours and 40 minutes. I marked the time. And the smallest one that got up out there was, I don't know what girl that was. I really forgot. One of Tony's granddaughter, I think. Little girl. She was at least about 3 maybe, 2 or 3. She got up and she said, I want to see something too. It just got quiet and she said, Basi means thank you in Indian. That's all she said. But that hall just roared because even little one is thinking. So I always call that our school, so that's when I have a chance to share things.
Raven's Story is brought to you through a partnership of KIYU, Catherine and Stephen Attla, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Hi, I'm Mike Spindler, your host for Raven's Story. In this chapter, Catherine Attla answered my questions about goose hunting around Huslia in the spring.
Back 1937, and that's when I stayed and fished a spring camp with my grandparents as my parents. That was the most birds I seen, like waterfowl. And I remember I was only 10, and there's a good place for geese up on a bank from Matahusli. We were staying in at Matahusli, where we left our boat, so we had to it was a scow boat with inboard, and so we have to stay right there where there's nothing. So all we were doing was he was hunting geese, and I go with him. I was alone with my grandparents. This was in 37. I was only 10, and I used to we came out in this lake, and there was so much bird. And I never shoot, but he gave me a gun, and he said, come out way up there, and so they'll fly towards me. So I did that, and I just about walked among the crane, and I got scared. I guess I was so small that they were not afraid. So I went back in, and I started hitting willows, and took off, and there was so much in the air that it was just black, going straight down, just like a doorway down there. He was hiding under the bank. And we did that twice, and that was enough for all spring. And that's how much bird there was. And right now there's, I wouldn't know how little there is. And I wouldn't know what decreased the bird. And there's hardly any geese. Well, this spring, I guess geese came to Fairbanks, but we all know that it was not coming this far north because it will snow. Every time it's going to snow again, they never come north for a while. Yeah. They just know it's going to snow. Everybody in Huslias is saying that it's going to snow, the elders.
And talking to other biologists from all the way down to the prairie states, is that there was some very stormy and cold weather that the birds hit on their way up here, and that delayed them also. Mm-hmm. And that kind of thing happens a lot. And I wonder if you can tell me a little bit about the kinds of places that you used to hunt geese in, that if you could describe what the kinds of places were like back in the days when hunting was really good.
Well, Wooler Lake is the best place that I ever known and heard about. I remember when we were living in the old village before 49, before we moved, I heard Willow Lake is good. Everybody used to go up Willow Lake. And why I say I don't know, what decreased all the waterfall, because from the time I remember, we would take few, not so much ducks, but geese, and people never did take more than they can use, and we always share. There's some people always can't hunt, especially elders, and people always take care of them. So I just about know how much cut off and Hustia took. Like the story I just told, why we took lots was Mom and them was in another camp. There was 5 of them, 3 adults and 2 kids. That's why they were getting lots. Why it was, and it still is, seemed like we missed that pot of geese soup, and that's what we have. That's the way we have it all the time. We never roast it like a lot of people do now, but seem like us Indians, we like that pot of soup, and that's because that's the way we used it when there was no moose, so there's hardly any meat except a lot of rabbit and things, and we just got to have that pot of soup, and that's the traditional delicacy for us.
Do you ever remember some years or some springs when geese didn't show up, or when the traveling conditions were so poor that you couldn't get to geese? And how did you feel when that happened?
That used to, and still at that, even if you get 1 or 2, That was enough as long as you got your pot of soup. I think there was so much waterfall those days that even they don't come right away to our place, but later on they're there. Well, I never been out in the spring camp since 1952, but even in the village we used to hear a lot of birds. Geese flying over, swan, crane. Gee, I never hear crane all spring yet. The first one that usually come. It used to be like music. 1952 is the last time we stayed up the flat, Dalby Slough flat. And from the time we moved to spring camp, that's late April, we start hearing birds. And then when the ice, when it was able to paddle around, it was even worse with all the ducks, and just like music, never let up, all 24 hours around, night and day. That's how much bird there was. And right now, I heard one bird so far, and that's all. And we don't even see geese fly over. And so that's how we know they're not here yet. It's holding on weather, I guess.
Raven's Story is brought to you through a partnership of KIYU, Catherine and Stephen Attla, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Hi, I'm Mike Spindler, your host for Raven's Story. In this chapter, Catherine Attla answered my questions about goose hunting around Huslea in summer and fall.
Yes, that was another best time for us is when the geese can fly, or the ducks. And I remember back in 30s, we used to stay in spring camp, and maybe twice they would go out in the lakes packing canoe. I used to pack canoe with Grandpa. And they get some ducks. And then they would make one trip either to Dalby in a gas boat or Huslea River. One trip a year. And they would get some geese, and they just about know how much each family would use, and then they quit taking them, and mostly by hand. We used to have a lot of fun grabbing them because they can't fly, and sometimes they shoot, but not so much. And then they pass it to whoever is near. And I remember they try to keep some, so they make 2 meals out of it. But the second one is always just about spoiling, even hanging it over the fire in smokehouse, because it's eating green and it can spoil overnight. But yet they finish everything. And those days I remember my sister Flora and I would try to help pluck the ducks and geese, and we would eat intestine. We clean it and cook it. And so everything was just about use except the wings and the foot, because there's no freezer, and we're so hungry for meat. And so that's another time.
And that was usually in July when it's really hot.
Yeah,
and everything.
It's hot, and
the meat won't keep very long at all.
Well, I notice there's times this one old lady, she used to set snares for rabbit, and it's not as good as winter, because you have to eat it right away because it's eating greens.
But you mentioned the geese. You actually smoked them sometimes when you wanted to store some goose meat?
Well, we never had dry geese. They never take that much in summer. Springtime we used to dry it, and the meat is good. It's not eating greens so much as summertime.
So when the geese start eating the greens, their meat isn't as good as in the springtime when
right.
they first arrive.
And seem like it's the same thing with rabbit, bear, anything that eats fresh greens. And I don't remember moose because we didn't have that much. If it was there, they would have got one if they know that, it'll keep.
Before we leave geese and talk about another animal, just do you remember in the fall time, geese leave pretty early a lot of times, but do you remember in the fall of ever having to rely on geese or how important they were then?
Yeah, I remember they used to try to get some, but it's not as easy as right now. They're just all over and seem like they're more wild.
Mm-hmm.
And very few times they would get some.
So the most important time for geese was the springtime, and then the next most important time was midsummer when they're molting their feathers, and the least important time was the fall.
We miss that geese in the summer, but we don't take them no more because we have meat in the freezer.
Right. Freezers changed everything, didn't
they?
Yeah.
Really. But we know the different taste of spring geese, it's just solid meat, and then we know the taste of young geese. And on young geese, I remember back in 30s and early 40s when they used to go out and, before the freezer, there's no meat, so they had to get some. And mostly what we get out of young geese is just the legs and the gizzard. That's two biggest part. And that, I guess that's why too, that as soon as there's freezer, nobody take them no more. It's just seem like it's just wasting meat or something.
But even in the old days, they only made like one trip or so in July to get the flightless geese. Mm-hmm. Now, in the springtime, before snowmobiles, did they just walk around or use canoes, or how did they get around to hunt geese in the springtime?
With dogs.
With dogs still.
With dogs,
there was enough snow and ice left that they could...
Yeah, like right now, it would have been easier if people try to use dogs, because dogs can walk in the water and your sleigh... you
don't get stuck as much.
You don't have to worry about getting stuck. And it was easier. Of course, it took longer, but it was easier to get around.
So do you think nowadays, with less people going to spring camp and people using snowmobiles now more than dog teams, they use geese actually less now than they used to?
Yes.
Geese is still important for you as a tradition, but you use them less than you used to. Mm-hmm. Did you ever take many of the Canada goose with the black feet?
Well, they're not up in the flat. Mm-hmm. They're more in the Fritz Slough.
In the slough?
Mm-hmm. That's where they used to get them. And they're... I notice all the time that they're not as fat as the orange.
Raven's Story is brought to you through a partnership of KIYU, Catherine and Stephen Attla, and the U.S. Fish and